What the camera sees. There's a specific moment on body camera footage that anyone who has watched enough of it begins to recognize. It happens just before the officer realizes what they have actually found. You can see it in how they move, the pace of the hand slowing down, the voice dropping slightly, the pause when the beam of the flashlight lands on something that does not match what the stop was supposed to be about. A seatbelt, a routine traffic enforcement detail on a Wednesday morning, a probation check on a man in a driveway, an anonymous letter that someone dropped in a mailbox 14 months ago. None of those things are supposed to produce what the cameras end up recording. But body cameras do not care what the stop was supposed to be about. They record what it became. And what today's episode is about is 4 moments when what a stop became is worth somewhere between $385,000 and a number nobody in a single precinct had ever seen come out of a single vehicle, a single house, or a single network operating out of a strip of South Florida county for more than a year. The 4 cases in today's episode share a format that drug interdiction bodycam footage tends to produce at its most revealing. The camera starts somewhere ordinary. A traffic stop at a suburban intersection. A pre-dawn SWAT approach on a residential driveway. A simultaneous 2-address search warrant executed in 2 counties at 5 in the morning. 15 warrants served across an entire metropolitan area in a single coordinated morning. And then something happens in the footage. A hidden compartment opens. A man runs out the back door. A suspect makes a joke about how slow he is. Or a neighborhood resident tells reporters that for years there has been unusual traffic at that house, and the dollar amount attached to what the officers are now looking at turns a routine into something else entirely. 4 cases. 4 completely different entry points into the same category of crime. A 21-year-old finance major at a Rhode Island college, driving a cousin's rental car, pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt. A 44-year-old man on probation for a prior trafficking conviction, spotted standing in his own driveway at 5 in the morning when a SWAT team arrives and immediately makes a decision to run inside, lock the door, and flush whatever's in his house down the toilet. A Daytona Beach man whose neighbors have been reporting him for large-scale cocaine and narcotics sales long enough that when law enforcement finally arrived at 6 in the morning, they found his 2 children asleep in bedrooms at the opposite end of the house from where more than 18 kilograms of powder cocaine was stored. And an anonymous handwritten letter, actually 3 of them, mailed to a single police department that set off a 14-month investigation, 17 search warrants, 15 simultaneous raids, and a seizure that included nearly $500,000 in cash, 11 vehicles, a boat, and 19 arrests of people whose ages range from 30 to 73. All 4 cases are fully verified. All 4 involve released or publicly documented body camera or surveillance footage. All 4 have documented law enforcement statements, charging documents, and at least partial court proceedings on record. The dollar amounts cited are those confirmed by the arresting agencies. In the 4 cases today, those dollar amounts are $385,000, a multi-million-dollar valuation at wholesale and street pricing, and seizures of cash alone totaling $452,026. Today's episode covers all 4, in order from most recent going back, and tells the story of what the cameras saw and what law enforcement found when they stopped treating the situation as ordinary. Before we get into the first case, I want you to pay attention to one thing across all 4 situations today. In every one of them, there was a moment before the stop where nothing was visible. The seatbelt was the only reason the car got pulled over. The driveway was the only reason the SWAT team made contact first. The neighbors' complaints were filed and handled before the warrant came. The anonymous letter was dropped in a mailbox by someone who did not know if it would ever be read. The question I want you to sit with is, how many of these same situations are happening right now in cities and intersections and houses and networks that have not yet produced the footage? Tell me in the comments. Finance major, cousin's rental car, 11 kilos, Cranston, Rhode Island, March 27, 2025. Thursday morning, March 27, 2025, just before 10 o'clock. The intersection of Park Avenue and Reservoir Avenue in Cranston, Rhode Island, a city just south of Providence, about 2 square miles of dense residential and commercial blocks. A Cranston police officer working a routine traffic enforcement detail spots a car moving through the intersection. The driver is not wearing a seatbelt. The officer initiates a traffic stop. The driver is 21-year-old Teddy Lopez, of Cranston, who tells the officer that the car belongs to his cousin, it is a rental, and that he is on his way to get an oil change and have some work done on the tires. The officer begins asking questions. The body camera is rolling. What is about to happen at a seatbelt stop on a Thursday morning in Rhode Island will produce the most unusual $385,000 drug seizure in Cranston Police Department history. The officer asks Lopez directly whether there's anything illegal in the vehicle. Cocaine, fentanyl, anything along those lines. On the body camera footage released publicly by the Cranston Police Department, Lopez laughs. He does not answer the cocaine and fentanyl question directly. He tells the officer he smokes a lot of weed. He describes the amount as literally just a little bit. About 2 ounces, he says. The officer notices several items in the vehicle he later describes as red flags. 3 cell phones in the center console, a handful of cash, a garbage bag in the back seat filled with marijuana-infused chocolate and candy edibles, and then, in the rear of the vehicle, a cup holder that does not sit flush. Something about the cup holder is off. The officer asks Lopez about it. Lopez says, "I don't know what you're talking about, man." The hidden electronic compartment. The Cranston Police K-9 unit was called in. Lopez was placed in the back of a patrol cruiser. Backup officers arrived and began a systematic search of the vehicle's interior. What the body camera then captures, and what the officer wearing it clearly was not prepared to find, based on the audio the footage records, is a moment the cup holder and the surrounding panel of the vehicle's interior are removed and the hidden space beneath them comes into view. The compartment is electronic. It is not a crevice or a factory gap. It is a purpose-built concealed space controlled by an electronic mechanism of the type used specifically to evade detection during traffic stops. Inside it, 11 kilograms of cocaine, 2.2 grams of fentanyl powder, 11 pressed fentanyl pills, 10 ounces of various types of marijuana, $1,700 in cash, seized for asset forfeiture. The Cranston Police Department later confirmed the total estimated street value of the narcotics at approximately $385,000. On the body camera recording, the officer's reaction when the compartment opens is immediate and audible. The Cranston Police Department Colonel Michael Winquist described the seizure at a news conference. In a city environment to seize 11 kilos at a traffic stop, it is highly unusual. He also said, "What we have here is people who bring this poison into this community with no remorse whatsoever, and they just profit from people's misery." The audio of the recording captured the unfiltered reaction of officers who had pulled over a car for a missing seatbelt and were now looking at enough cocaine to supply a significant portion of southern New England. The Providence College finance student, Teddy Lopez, 21 years old, was a student at Providence College at the time of his arrest, confirmed by the college in a statement issued after his name became public. The college said, "The news of this incident was both surprising and disappointing. We are gathering all necessary information to determine next steps in accordance with our student conduct policy." Lopez was listed in arrest records as a resident of 400 Farmington Avenue, Cranston. He had no other documented criminal history in Rhode Island records at the time of the arrest. Lopez was charged with possession of cocaine over 1 kilogram with intent to deliver, a felony in Rhode Island carrying significant mandatory sentencing exposure. He also faced 2 counts of possession of Schedule II narcotics under 10 grams, specifically covering the fentanyl powder and pills, and possession of marijuana with intent to deliver. He was held without bail. A status conference in his case was scheduled for April 3, 2025. The Cranston Police Department noted publicly that the investigation was ongoing and that law enforcement believed additional suspects were involved beyond Lopez himself. The car with the electronic compartment belonged to his cousin's rental, as he had told the officer. Investigators were examining who else in the supply chain had access to the vehicle and the compartment. The detail that lodges itself in this case, the one that distinguishes it from the kind of drug seizure that produces a standard press release and no further attention, is a cup holder, 11 kilograms of cocaine, a seatbelt, a cup holder that did not sit flush. The officer who noticed it had been working a traffic enforcement detail on a Thursday morning. The electronic compartment under that cup holder was sophisticated enough to require a physical disassembly of the vehicle's interior to access. Lopez had laughed when asked about cocaine and fentanyl. He had described 2 ounces of marijuana as just a little bit. He was on his way to get an oil change. He was 21 years old and he was studying finance at Providence College, and in the electronic compartment in his cousin's rental car was $385,000 worth of narcotics, a seatbelt violation, 3 cell phones, a cup holder that did not sit flush, 11 kilograms of cocaine in an electronic hidden compartment, a finance student at Providence College, no prior criminal history. The Cranston Police Department said the investigation was ongoing and that additional suspects were involved beyond Lopez. That means the 21-year-old in the back of the patrol car was not the top of the supply chain. He was somewhere in the middle of it. Who do you think is above him? And what do you think happened to those people after this stop? Tell me in the comments. A seatbelt, a Thursday morning traffic enforcement detail, a cup holder that did not sit flush, an electronic hidden compartment, $385,000, 11 kilograms of cocaine, a finance major at Providence College who laughed when the officer asked about cocaine and told him there was just a little bit of marijuana in the car. He was not lying about the marijuana. He just did not mention the cocaine. The officer on the body camera did not know what he was looking at until the interior of the car came apart. Then the audio said everything that needed to be said. The cup holder gave it away. 18 kilos and 2 kids in the house. Daytona Beach, Florida, October 4th, 2024. Friday morning, October 4th, 2024. 6 a.m. A home on Pelican Bay Road in Daytona Beach, Volusia County, Florida. The East Volusia Narcotics Task Force, with SWAT support from the Volusia County Sheriff's Office and the Volusia Bureau of Investigation, arrives to execute a narcotics search warrant. The warrant has been issued following what the Volusia Sheriff's Office describes as an extended investigation into complaints that the resident of this address was involved in large-scale narcotic sales of cocaine and fentanyl. The resident is 40-year-old Rakeem Shabazz. He and his girlfriend, 38-year-old Shanette Range, are located in the master bedroom area of the home when officers enter. At the opposite end of the house, in separate bedrooms, are Shabazz's 2 minor children. Both children are alive and unharmed. Deputies speak with a mother, who does not reside at the address, and the children are released to a family friend before the full search begins. What the search produces, once the children are out of the house and officers begin moving through the rooms, is one of the largest single residence drug seizures documented in Volusia County's publicly released case records in this period. The body camera footage in the official VSO release document defines in clinical language that cannot fully communicate what 18-plus kilograms of powder cocaine, plus trafficking quantities of crack cocaine, fentanyl, methamphetamine, and oxycodone looks like inside a residential home. But the footage released by the Volusia County Sheriff's Office alongside the arrest announcement shows it in the way that body cameras always show it, room by room, package by package, the scale of what was being stored in a house where 2 children were asleep at the other end. The investigation that led to the door. The Volusia County Sheriff's Office does not specify the exact timeline of complaints that preceded the search warrant, but the phrase extended investigation in the official release is significant in context. Narcotics Task Forces in Volusia County, a multi-agency operation that includes VSO detectives alongside Edgewater PD, New Smyrna Beach PD, and Port Orange PD, with federal oversight from the FBI and Homeland Security investigations, typically pursue extended investigations when the target is not street-level but mid- to upper-level distribution. The quantity found at Pelican Bay Road confirms this. 18 kilograms of powder cocaine is not a street dealer's inventory. It is a supply quantity. The crack cocaine, fentanyl, meth, and oxycodone found alongside it represent a multi-substance distribution operation running out of a home where children were present. Both Rakeem Shabazz and Shanette Range were arrested at the scene and transported to the Volusia County Branch Jail without bond. Both faced numerous counts of trafficking in narcotics, a charge in Florida that carries mandatory minimum sentences that scale with the weight of the substance involved. For cocaine trafficking at the quantities found on Pelican Bay Road, Florida law provides some mandatory minimums beginning at 15 years and escalating significantly based on total weight, with a distinction between powder cocaine and crack cocaine carrying separate statutory treatment. At the quantities found, 18-plus kilos of powder cocaine alone, before accounting for crack, fentanyl, meth, and oxycodone, the sentencing exposure for both individuals was substantial. Additionally, both adults faced charges of child neglect. The VSO official release states specifically that numerous items of narcotics and narcotics paraphernalia were located throughout the residence and readily accessible to the children. The word throughout is doing significant work in that sentence. The investigation into exactly how the drugs were distributed across the house, what the children's proximity to specific items was, and what the total child neglect exposure would look like at sentencing was part of the ongoing case. What the footage shows. The VSO released footage and a detailed case announcement simultaneously with the arrest confirmation. The footage, which the agency posts to its public channels as part of a broader strategy of transparency and community communication that Sheriff Mike Chitwood has made a hallmark of the VSO's public communications under his tenure, documents the search in the way that this type of multi-substance residential find tends to document itself. The packages are photographed and weighed, the rooms are documented, and the presence of children's belongings in the bedrooms at the far end of the house stands in contrast to what is being catalogued in the rest of it. Colonel Chitwood has made specific statements in prior cases about what a house full of drugs and children represents from a law enforcement perspective. He has said, in the context of similar cases in Volusia County, that these are the cases that stay with you where the kids had no say and no way out of the house they were living in. This case is in that category. The 2 children on Pelican Bay Road woke up that Friday morning and were removed from the house before they could see what their father's bedroom contained. They were placed with a family friend while their parents were transported to the county jail without bond. The house had been the subject of complaints from the community long enough that a task force investigation had produced a warrant. The children had been living there through all of it. The charges in the case. Rokeem Shabazz and Shanette Raines were booked into the Volusia County Branch Jail without bond on the morning of October 4, 2024. The charges included multiple counts of trafficking in cocaine, a first-degree felony in Florida for amounts at this level, as well as trafficking in the additional substances found: fentanyl, methamphetamine, oxycodone, and crack cocaine. Both were additionally charged with child neglect under Florida statute, reflecting conditions under which the children had been living in the home. The Volusia County Sheriff's Office confirmed that the case would proceed through the Volusia County court system with prosecution through the Florida Attorney General's Office of Statewide Prosecution, which handles major trafficking cases in the county. The dollar value of the narcotics found at Pelican Bay Road was not specified in precise terms in the VSO's official release. Unlike the Cranston case, where the department produced a specific $385,000 figure. But the wholesale and street values of the quantities involved can be calculated from DEA pricing data for the southeastern United States. 18 kilograms of powder cocaine alone, at average wholesale prices in the region, represent a value in the range of $360,000 to over $500,000 depending on purity and buyer relationship. At street prices, the same quantity is considerably higher. When the additional trafficking quantities of fentanyl, methamphetamine, oxycodone, and crack cocaine are included, the total retail value of the Pelican Bay Road inventory was well into the millions. To put the scale in a different frame, the fentanyl found at Pelican Bay Road in trafficking quantities is a substance that, according to the DEA and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, is lethal in doses as small as 2 milligrams, roughly the size of 10 to 15 grains of table salt. Trafficking quantities are measured in grams and kilograms. The gap between those two numbers, between 2 milligrams and what was found in that Daytona Beach home, is a gap between a dose and a supply. The inventory at Pelican Bay Road was not consumer quantity. It was supply chain quantity, stored in a house on a residential street where the neighbors had been filing complaints for long enough that the task force investigation had produced a court-authorized warrant. Every package that investigators documented in that house represented an order of magnitude more individual units than anything a retail buyer would ever encounter in a single transaction. The extended investigation had been following the supply. The 6 a.m. warrant was where the supply was: 18 kilograms of cocaine. Trafficking amounts of fentanyl, meth, crack, and oxycodone. 2 children in the house, at the other end of it, asleep in their bedrooms. A mother who lived somewhere else. The neighbors had been complaining long enough for an extended investigation to produce a warrant. Both adults were taken to jail without bond. The children went to a family friend. What should the child neglect charges carry in a case like this one, where the drugs were located throughout the residence and described as readily accessible to the children? Tell me in the comments. 6 in the morning, Pelican Bay Road. 2 children at the opposite end of the house. 18 plus kilos of powder cocaine, trafficking amounts of crack, fentanyl, meth, and oxycodone. The neighbors had been reporting it for long enough that the task force had enough for a warrant. The children were removed before the search began. Both adults were taken to jail without bond on the same morning. The body camera went room by room through a house where the drugs and the children's bedrooms were separated only by distance. The children had been living in that house the whole time. He ran. He flushed. They found it anyway. Dubai and Sanford, Florida, February 19, 2026. Wednesday morning, February 19, 2026. 5 a.m. 2 locations, 2 counties. One suspect with probation file that runs to 2031 for a prior trafficking conviction, trafficking in heroin, which means that Antoine Tillman, 44 years old, has been living under a court order that specifically prohibits him from committing any new criminal offenses for the entirety of this period. The Volusia County Sheriff's Office narcotics detectives have been watching him. They have obtained search warrants for 2 addresses, his home at 201 Ancona Avenue in Dubai, Volusia County, and a second residence he maintains in Sanford, Seminole County, approximately 20 miles to the south. The plan is simultaneous execution. At the same moment that Volusia SWAT pulls up to Ancona Avenue, Seminole County Sheriff's deputies are approaching the Sanford address. The idea is that Tillman, caught between the 2 warrants, cannot be somewhere he is not. At 201 Ancona Avenue in Dubai, Antoine Tillman is in the driveway when the SWAT team arrives. He is outside, visible, within the first seconds of the approach. For a moment, this looks like a situation that resolves quickly and without complication. Then it becomes something else. Tillman looks at the SWAT team arriving at his address at 5 in the morning, turns around, goes inside his own house, and locks the door. The body camera footage captures the next sequence. Deputies approach the door, announce themselves, and begin the process of making entry. Inside the house, Tillman moves to the bathroom and begins flushing whatever he has time to flush. Then he makes his second decision of the morning. He goes out the back. He didn't get too far. Tillman ran toward the back of the property. The Volusia County Sheriff's Office release describes what happened next in a sentence. He didn't get too far before he was tackled. The body camera on the deputy who tackled him captured the chase and the takedown. After Tillman was on the ground and in handcuffs, one of the deputies told him, "When I saw you take off, I was like, this big guy actually got a chance." Tillman, lying on the ground being handcuffed, said, "I'm slow as hell." It is a kind of moment that body camera footage produces and that official press releases do not normally include, but that sheriff's departments in Florida have learned to release because it communicates something about the reality of the encounter that numbers and charge sheets cannot. A man on probation until 2031 for heroin trafficking, who flushed his drugs at 5 in the morning and then ran out the back of his own house, said I'm slow as hell on body camera before he was transported. The flushing, it turned out, was a problem that the investigators had already anticipated as a possibility. Detectives searching the interior of 201 Ancona Avenue found evidence inside the house that drugs had been flushed down the toilet. But they did not stop at the toilet. They went outside and checked the plumbing. Cocaine and cocaine packaging were recovered from the external plumbing of the house. The drugs that Tillman believed he had successfully destroyed were still there, just no longer inside the building. The VSO later stated this in the official release without editorial comment, because the result speaks for itself. He flushed the drugs. Investigators found them anyway, in the pipes outside his house. The second address. While Tillman was being tackled in the backyard of Ancona Avenue, Seminole County Sheriff's deputies were executing the simultaneous warrant at his second residence in Sanford. This is a part of the operation that the single address headline misses. The Sanford warrant was not a follow-up. It was running at the same time. While Tillman was outside in Dubai deciding whether to run, deputies in Sanford were already inside his other home. What they found there was considerably more than the cocaine that came out of the Dubai plumbing. The Seminole County search produced cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl. The quantities have not been specified in the publicly available charging documents, but the VSO confirmed that the Sanford residence yielded significant amounts of all 3 substances, the full complement of what Tillman had been storing at the address he did not run to. The simultaneous 2-county approach is a specific tactical decision with a specific legal purpose. If law enforcement serves a warrant at one address and the subject has time, even a few minutes, to communicate with someone at the second address, evidence can be moved or destroyed before the second warrant arrives. By executing both warrants at the same moment through coordination between Volusia and Seminole County deputies, the operation closed that window entirely. Tillman could run from Ancona Avenue. He could flush what was in the Dubai bathroom. He could not do anything about what was in Sanford, because while he was running out his back door, Seminole County was already inside his other front door. The charges and the context. Antoine Tillman was charged with violation of probation, which, given that his probation runs to 2031 for heroin trafficking, will likely trigger probation revocation hearing with exposure to whatever original sentence was suspended in that case, in addition to the new charges. He was additionally charged with possession of cocaine with intent to sell, tampering with evidence, the flushing and obstruction of an officer without violence. The tampering charge is legally significant because it reflects a specific act of flushing controlled substances during a law enforcement search, which Florida statute covers under evidence destruction. The obstruction charge reflects a decision to lock the door when the SWAT team arrived, not the physical flight itself. The probation violation alone is a serious legal development that operates separately from the new criminal charges. In Florida, a conviction for a felony while on felony probation typically results in probation revocation and can trigger the imposition of a previously withheld or suspended sentence from the original case. For Tillman, whose original conviction involved trafficking in heroin, that original case carries its own sentencing structure that the new arrests now put back into play. His legal exposure in the wake of the Dubai and Sanford warrants is not just the new cocaine trafficking and tampering charges. It also includes whatever the court determines his probation violation means for the sentence he was serving when this morning began. By the end of February 19th, 2026, Antoine Tillman was navigating two county court systems, a probation revocation proceeding, and charges that included evidence tampering for drugs that investigators had already recovered from the external plumbing of his own house. The cocaine recovered from the external plumbing of Ancona Avenue is a physical evidence of the tampering charge. It is also the detail of this case that makes the body camera footage particularly striking. The image of investigators finding what someone tried to flush outside the walls of the building is a specific kind of outcome in a drug investigation. The evidence that survives an attempt to destroy it and becomes, in doing so, a more complete record of what the investigation found than it would have been if the suspect had simply opened the door. The VSO's public release of the Tillman Bodycam footage follows the pattern of transparency that the Volusia County Sheriff's Office has made standard in major narcotics cases, which serves both investigative documentation and community communication purposes. Tillman was booked. His probation officer was notified. His case was added to both county dockets. He was on probation until 2031 for trafficking heroin. He was in the driveway when the SWAT team arrived. He went inside. He locked the door. He flushed the drugs. He ran out the back. He was tackled and said, "I'm slow as hell" on camera. The investigators found the cocaine in the pipes outside the house anyway. At the exact same time in Sanford, a second team found cocaine, meth, and fentanyl. How should probation violations interact with new trafficking charges in a case like this one? And what does it say about probation as a tool that someone with a trafficking conviction to 2031 was apparently running this kind of operation? Tell me in the comments. 5 a.m., 2 counties, one man in a driveway who looked at the SWAT team and went inside and locked the door. He flushed the drugs. He ran out the back. He said, "I'm slow as hell" when they caught him. The investigators found the cocaine in the external plumbing anyway. In Sanford, at the exact same moment, the second team was already inside his other address finding cocaine, meth, and fentanyl. He has been on probation for heroin trafficking since before any of this started. His probation runs to 2031. His case is now on 2 county dockets. The drugs he flushed were waiting for investigators in the pipes outside his house. Operation Trackside, 3 letters in 14 months. Boynton Beach to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, September 3rd, 2025. July 2024. A handwritten letter arrives at the Boynton Beach Police Department. Then a second letter. Then a third. All 3 are anonymous. All 3 are from someone in a neighborhood in Boynton Beach who has been watching what is happening on their street and has decided to write it down and mail it to the police. The letters describe drug trafficking activity. They describe what the letter writer has seen, the traffic at certain houses, the patterns of people coming and going, the sense that something is being run through the neighborhood at a scale that a single address does not account for. Boynton Beach Police Chief Joe DiGiulio described the start of what would become Operation Trackside in a press conference on September 4, 2025. This investigation began with a single drug complaint back in July of 2024. A small tip ultimately led to uncovering a major drug trafficking operation operating through Palm Beach and Broward counties. 3 simple handwritten letters were mailed to the Boynton Beach Police Department. This illustrates the power of strong communities, relationships, and public trust. What those 3 letters produced across 14 months was one of the largest coordinated drug trafficking takedowns in recent South Florida history. The Boynton Beach Police Department's narcotic detectives, working alongside the Drug Enforcement Administration's Enforcement Group 2 out of West Palm Beach, traced the organization across multiple counties, identified its members and structure, and documented its operations through surveillance and investigation long enough and thoroughly enough to obtain 17 separate search warrants. On September 3, 2025, 15 of those warrants were served simultaneously. At the same moment that SWAT teams were blasting through the garage of a Fort Lauderdale home on camera, other teams were moving on addresses in Boynton Beach, Lake Worth, Boca Raton, West Palm Beach, Riviera Beach, and Mangonia Park. 19 individuals were arrested. The ages of those arrested range from 30 to 73 years old. What 14 months of investigation produced? The scale of a 14-month investigation into a single trafficking organization is not something that shows up fully in any single press conference or any single dollar amount. It shows up in the detail of what investigators know by the time the warrants are served. Sergeant Darren Whitefield of the Boynton Beach Police Department described the intensity of the final phase at a media briefing. Over the last 70 days is when we really ramped it up, where we were on these guys 70 days straight. 12 to 16 hours a day following them around. A lot of them had 2 different homes. They had one that they sleep at and they had one that they would do their drug activity at. That detail 2 different homes, one to sleep and one for drug activity, explains the specific challenge of this type of investigation and the specific reason that 17 warrants were necessary rather than a single address. The organization was not operating out of one house. It was distributed across an entire social and geographic network that stretched from Boynton Beach through Lake Worth, Boca Raton, West Palm Beach, Riviera Beach, and into Broward County. Each address in the warrant set represented a node in a network that investigators had spent 14 months mapping. The simultaneous execution of 15 warrants was not a dramatic tactical choice made for its own sake. It was the only way to close the network all at once and prevent any single arrested member from communicating a warning to the others before officers arrived. The seizures. On September 3rd, officers executing the 15 simultaneous warrants seized 5,027 grams of narcotics, including cocaine, fentanyl, and oxycodone, 6 handguns, 2 semi-automatic rifles, 11 vehicles, 1 boat, $452,026 in cash, a figure precise enough to suggest it was counted rather than estimated, which is itself a detail worth noting. The cash was seized for civil asset forfeiture proceedings. The vehicles and the boat represent transportation and logistics assets of the trafficking network. 11 vehicles is not personal transportation at any ordinary scale. Chief DiGiulio described the individuals arrested as not street-level drug dealers. He said, "These are high-level drug suppliers, so it's not easy to get to these individuals unless you put a lot of time and effort into these investigations." The characterization is supported by the organizational structure that the investigation documented. The network included suppliers, distributors, and buyers across 2 counties, with members maintaining separate residences for personal and operational use, following surveillance patterns that required 70 straight days of 12 to 16-hour observation to fully map. The oldest defendant arrested was 73 years old. The youngest was 30. The network was not organized by age or by neighborhood. It was organized by role and by relationship. The Fort Lauderdale SWAT footage. Of the 15 simultaneous warrants, the one that produced footage that circulated most widely was a Fort Lauderdale execution. Surveillance footage captured by law enforcement and shared with media showed the SWAT team's entry. Officers breached the garage of the residence in a way that the footage shows, but the official releases describe only as executing a search warrant. A man was detained at the scene. He faces multiple felony charges, including trafficking cocaine. His neighbor, William Ward, told reporters, for years there's been unusual traffic at that residence. The neighbor had noticed what the anonymous letter writer in Boynton Beach had also noticed, a pattern of activity at a house that does not match what a house normally looks like. In Ward's case, it had been years. In the letter writer's case, it had been long enough to put pen to paper and mail 3 separate letters to the police. Chief DiGiulio confirmed at a press conference that additional arrests were anticipated beyond the 19 made on September 3rd. The Florida Attorney General's Office of Statewide Prosecution, which later transitioned to Attorney General James Alfmeier's office, confirmed it was prosecuting the cases. Alfmeier said, "Drug traffickers who push poison like cocaine and fentanyl into our communities are profiting off the death of Floridians. In Florida, the consequences are simple. If you buy or sell illicit drugs, our statewide prosecutors will ensure you spend a long time behind bars." The total number of defendants facing charges through the Attorney General's office ultimately reached 24 across both counties. What 3 letters did? The most striking fact about Operation Trackside is not the 14 months or the 17 warrants or the $452,000 in cash or the 11 vehicles or the boat or the 19 arrests across a range of ages from 30 to 73. The most striking fact is the origin. 3 anonymous handwritten letters mailed to a police department. Someone in a neighborhood who had been watching something happen on their street and decided to write it down. They did not know if anyone would read the letters. They did not leave a name or return address. They wrote what they saw and they mailed it and they waited. The police department that received the letters could have filed them. They could have triaged them the way law enforcement agencies receiving anonymous tips must triage everything that arrived without a name or verifiable contact. With skepticism, with limited resources, with awareness that most tips require significant investigation before they produce anything actionable. Instead, the Boynton Beach Police Department's narcotic detectives read 3 handwritten letters and began watching. What they found over the following 14 months confirmed what the anonymous writer had described, not just in Boynton Beach but across 2 counties, involving multiple levels of a distribution network, in a structure sophisticated enough that the final phase of the investigation required 70 consecutive days of 12 to 16-hour surveillance to map completely. The letters were correct. The writer had seen something real. They had written it down and mailed it, and someone had picked it up, and it had produced this. 14 months later, on a Wednesday evening, they could have turned on the local news or opened the Boynton Beach Police Department's social media and seen the footage of SWAT teams moving simultaneously through South Florida and heard a police chief say, a small tip ultimately led to uncovering a major drug trafficking operation. The small tip was 3 handwritten letters in a mailbox. What they produced was one of the largest coordinated narcotics takedowns in the region in recent memory. The neighbor on the Fort Lauderdale street said he had been watching unusual traffic at that house for years. The anonymous letter writer in Boynton Beach decided not to wait any longer. They were both looking at the same kind of operation from different angles, and one of them decided to do something about it, and what they did was put a pen to paper and mail it. 3 anonymous handwritten letters. 14 months of investigation. 17 search warrants, 15 simultaneous raids, 19 arrests, ages 30 to 73, $452,026 in cash, 11 vehicles, a boat. The letter writer does not know what happened. They never left a name. They mailed 3 letters and waited. Do you think anonymous tips like that get taken seriously enough by law enforcement? And how many of the letters that arrive at police departments end up producing nothing, versus how many end up producing something like this? Tell me in the comments. July 2024. 3 anonymous handwritten letters. 14 months later, 15 simultaneous SWAT raids across South Florida. 19 arrests, ages 30 to 73. $452,026 in cash. 11 vehicles. A boat. 6 handguns. 2 semi-automatic rifles. The Fort Lauderdale neighbor said he had seen unusual traffic at that house for years. The letter writer in Boynton Beach decided not to wait any longer. They never left a name. Somewhere in South Florida, there is a person who mailed 3 letters and does not know what their letters built. Chief DiGiulio said, "This illustrates the power of strong communities, relationships, and public trust." He was describing the 3 letters. He was right. What the camera recorded. 4 cases, 4 different ways that law enforcement and body cameras ended up in the same place at the same time with something worth hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in front of a lens. A seatbelt. A pre-dawn SWAT approach on a driveway where a man on probation until 2031 was standing outside at 5 in the morning. A 6 a.m. warrant at a house where 2 children were asleep at the far end while trafficking quantities of 5 different controlled substances were stored throughout the rest of it. And 3 anonymous handwritten letters that sat in a mailbox in Boynton Beach long enough to become, 14 months later, the largest coordinated drug trafficking takedown that part of South Florida had seen in years. The dollar amounts across these 4 cases are worth placing in sequence. $385,000 in a hidden electronic compartment in a rental car driven by a 21-year-old finance student pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt. A multi-million-dollar wholesale and street valuation at a Daytona Beach home where cocaine was measured by the kilogram and stored alongside 4 other controlled substances in a house with children. An undisclosed but significant seizure at 2 addresses across 2 counties, with part of the evidence found outside the building in the pipes that connected to the toilet where the suspect had tried to flush it, and $452,026 in cash counted, not estimated, seized across 15 simultaneous search warrants in a 2-county operation alongside 11 vehicles, a boat, and 8 firearms. There is a version of a drug supply chain that is easy to describe in abstract terms: the cartel, the distributor, the mid-level mover, the street dealer, the buyer, and a version of it that body cameras make concrete. The concrete version is a 21-year-old who laughed when he was asked about cocaine, sitting in the back of a patrol cruiser while officers found the compartment. A 4 to 4-year-old who flushed the evidence and ran out the back of his own house and said I'm slow as hell when he was caught in the yard. 2 adults in a master bedroom at the end of a house where their children were sleeping, and 18 kilograms of cocaine was packaged and stored in the rooms between them and the front door. A 73-year-old man whose name appears on a trafficking indictment alongside of 30-year-olds, both of them nodes in a network that somebody mapped with handwritten letters before investigators spent 14 months documenting the same thing with surveillance equipment. The abstract version of the supply chain does not show you these people. The body camera does. What all 4 cases share is a gap between what the initial contact looked like and what it became. That gap is what body camera footage documents and what official press releases summarize but cannot fully convey. The officer at Park Avenue and Reservoir Avenue in Cranston was working a seatbelt detail. He was not expecting to disassemble a car's interior and find 11 kilos of cocaine in an electronic hidden compartment. The Volusia SWAT team that arrived at Ancona Avenue in Dubai was executing a search warrant, but the specific sequence of a suspect running inside, locking the door, flushing drugs, running out the back, getting tackled, and saying I'm slow as hell on camera while the cocaine was still in the pipes outside, that is not something a warrant application can describe in advance. The 6 a.m. entry at Pelican Bay Road in Daytona Beach produced a scene that investigators document and cameras record, and that the VSO releases publicly, in part because a community that had been living around that address had the right to know what was inside it. And the 15 simultaneous SWAT entries across South Florida on September 3rd, 2025, produced footage of an operation that began with 3 letters written by someone who did not leave a name. The body camera does not judge what it records. It does not add drama to the moment the hidden compartment opens, or to the deputy who said, when I saw you take off, I was like, this big guy actually got a chance. It does not comment on the children's rooms at the far end of the Pelican Bay Roadhouse, or on the neighbor who told reporters for years there has been unusual traffic at that residence. It records the officer's hands, the beam of the flashlight, the audio of whoever is in the frame, and whatever's on the other side of the door when it opens. What those cameras recorded in these 4 cases, across 14 months in multiple states, and a scale of operation that ranges from a single hidden compartment to a 14-month multi-county investigation, is 4 different answers to the same question about what is actually moving through American cities and suburbs and residential streets in rental cars and residential homes and across networks mapped over 70 consecutive days of 12 to 16-hour surveillance. The body cameras recorded it. The cases are in the courts. Tell me in the comments which of today's 4 cases you think represents the most significant seizure, not just by dollar value, but by what it says about the scale and structure of the supply chain it came from. And tell me what you think about the anonymous letter writer in Boynton Beach who set off 14 months of investigation, 17 warrants, 15 simultaneous raids, and never left a name. New episode coming. See you in the next one.